Hello there, and welcome to Love Wargames. In this episode of What to Build, we will have a look at the largest release of August 2022, which was the Black Wolf Battlefleet. This is a very interesting box because you can play it either as Commonwealth ships, and you can just say, okay, those are actually not from the Black Wolf, they are Russian or Ukrainian ships. Great. You can play those as a whole Black Wolf fleet, only Black Wolf fleet, and say, okay, this is my fleet. They're only made of Black Wolves, and I place them as those, and I use these rules. Great. Or you can play those as Black Wolf, but include them as mercenaries in other fleets, so they can fight side by side with French or Americans or Japanese, whatever. Whichever your nation, you can have a Black Wolf Battlefleet on the side as a complement as mercenaries. So this makes this box very interesting for all players. What do you actually get? It costs £85, which is on the more expensive side of boxes, but you do get a lot of things, as you can see. And with all these ships, you can easily go more than 2,000 points with this fleet. And let's remember that the classic size of games is between 750 and 1,500 points. So you can really have some variation in this. Or you can even play massive games at 2,000 or even more points just with the Black Wolf Battlefleet with this single box. What do you get? You get the mobile Stronghold, which is this giant donut you can build as a Murmansk or Tobolsk, or as the named version, the Anastasia. Then you get two Grand Submarines, mass 3, so quite large, that can be built as a generic Aquila or the named version, the Deathbringer. Do note that the only flagships available for the Black Wolf are the Anastasia and the Deathbringer. You don't have a generic flagship, which means that if you do want to play those as mercenaries, you should build them as the Anastasia or the Deathbringer, or both, or at least have the option to magnetize them and switch between one and the other, because otherwise your list will not be legal. You also get 4 of these Rizak Mass 2 submarines, as well as 4 Mass 1 submarines, the Piranhas. We will see that they are very, very good ships, both from a model and rules point of view. You also get some of the older support cruisers of the Russians that we discovered with the Możaiski Battlefleet. Of these, there is a little trap. They did give you the full sprues, which is very nice, but if you build this fleet as a Black Wolf mercenaries, the only legal ship in your list is the Khatanga. The Pravda and the Morosko, which are very good still, cannot be used in a Black Wolf Battlefleet. So be careful here. We will talk about it more when we see these ships in details. You also get 4 of the Stoletov Ekranoplans, which are these very large plane boat mix, kind of skimming, which are actually based on real life boat plane thing. And they are very cool models. They are still devastating, a bit fragile, but it's very nice to have these in the Black Wolf Battlefleet as well. Finally, you get 4 SRS tokens. More is always good. If you play those as Black Wolf, the only aircraft carriers that you can bring is the Tobolsk or the Anastasia. You don't have others. If you play those as Russian and Ukrainians, yes, you can bring the Pravda as well. So 4 SRS token might feel a bit like overkill, but more is always better. It looks better on the table when you have several SRS tokens next to each other rather than having just one pile, I think. So it's very nice to have 4 of those. So let's have a look and start with the Grand Submarines. You have 2 versions, the Aquila and the Deathbringer. The Aquila being the generic one that you can have as a basic unit for the Black Wolf, or you can bring it in the Ukrainian Battlefleet. If you do, then it becomes a flagship, which is quite important to note, because it means it can lead its own fleets. What it does, very good, is throwing torpedoes. 22 torpedoes at closing range. That is extremely good for 210 points. Plus, it is very resilient because it is submerged, which is already good because it counts as being obscured. And it has ablative armor, which is quite insane on a submarine, and means that the enemy will need to dedicate either submarine hunting and ablative armor bypassing weapons, which is quite specific to kill it efficiently, or your enemy will need to focus a lot of firepower on this, which is good. It can actually be more tanky than its default stat line lets it believe to be. The weird thing about it is that it has some weirdly angled weapons. Some torpedoes are only shooting to the rear. These seismic mortars are shooting 270 degrees to the rear. So the best way technically to use it, and this is going to be a bit of a learning curve to know when to do this or not, but the most efficient way, let's say, would be to use unexpected arrival to deep strike this ship, starting at turn 2, and to have some ships in the front and some ships in the rear, so you can really maximize the firepower. But it's quite difficult to do it so efficiently, so I would not recommend doing this with this as a new player. You can absolutely just deploy it normally as a normal unit in your regular deployment zone and just have it throw torpedoes and rockets like all game long, and it will be very efficient and you will be very happy with it. Then you get the Deathbringer. And what does this do? It's much more expensive than the Aquila at 311 points. Like it's like, oh damn. And it does have less torpedoes actually. Oops. But what it does get is this drill. And this drill is extremely powerful. If you've seen our latest battle report, it's the same as the one on the Hatanga, so you know that it can do a lot of damage. And yeah, it's just very efficient. So this Deathbringer, you can use it very offensively, aggressively, or more defensively. How so? If you play it aggressively, first of all, you can bring 2 of the Mass 1 submarines, the Piranhas, which are the smallest one, in the deep strike with it, and that's already very good. You can have a big thorn in the back of your opponent, and it can actually do its ramming action the turn it arrives, so it can really just obliterate something in turn 2. Very good, especially if your enemy has an aircraft carrier or something like this, quite vulnerable in the rear of its line. Or you can play it more defensively, because if the enemy tries to counter your extreme range weaponry by just charging at you, you can tell to the enemy, okay, you're coming very fast at me, but remember, you cannot come too close because I do have this drill, and if you come in range, I will ram you and destroy you. So it can be kind of like a deterrent for your enemy, so they don't charge you too fast. And yeah, you just put the Deathbringer kind of like at the front. It is still quite tanky. It's even tankier than the Aquila. And yeah, you don't want it to attract too much fire, but it can really keep the enemy at bay with the threat of the drill. Now let's talk a bit more about the Black Wolf Battlefleet itself. What do you get? As we said, you need to bring either a Deathbringer or an Anastasia, which means you will never be able to have more than 2 Black Wolf Battlefleets in your list at the same time. You need to have a mandatory unit of Rizak or Piranha, which is very fine. They're very good ships, as we will see. You would want to bring them anyway. And this is what we said. There is only a specific list of ship that you can bring. You can bring an Aquila, which is this one. You can bring the 2 smaller submarines, the Rizak Mass 2, Piranha Mass 1. The Stoletov, the skinning plane that we've talked about, which is now Mass 1, very good. Or specifically the Hatanga out of all the support cruisers you can build. And that's it. You cannot bring any other ship than those, which is a little restriction, but they're all very good, and you can absolutely make a list work with this, as we will see at the end of the video when we will make a list proposition. You do get the bonus of being able to include multiple submerged units, which is mandatory because you have a lot of submerged units. Without this, it would just not work. And all your ships lose their national keywords, such as Russian or Ukrainian, and they become Black Wolf instead. It means that they are much more efficient in boarding, either offensively or defensively. But if you are losing the game in terms of victory points, they lose this bonus. It's a very fluffy rule, because like, yeah, they are mercenaries, so if you're losing, they will not fight as hard and they might want to just run away and not lose their life for nothing. But it would be good that if you play only Black Wolf, this rule just disappears because they're fighting for themselves. But whatever, it's still a very fluffy rule and very cool. Then we switch to the Donut of Death, which is a stupid nickname, but it does look like a donut. It is a beautiful model but yeah. You can build it either as a generic Murmansk or Tobolsk, or bring it as the Anastasia, the named variant. We will talk a bit about the three because it's really a big centerpiece, and it does take you have few options on how to play each of those. The Murmansk, first of all, is the cheapest version. Yeah, cheapest at 445 points. Yeah, quite steep. It got a quite massive point increase recently. It is the best repair facility in the entire game, bar none. Like, this thing throws 8 dice, and you can repair the ships around you. You can repair yourself. You can remove some disorder tokens, some critical damage. Like, if you are standing next to a Murmansk, you're pretty chill. Like, your life is fine. You do get even additional cards, and we've seen how important cards are with logistical support. It is resilient, but not that resilient for its point cost. So don't bring it, don't charge it to the towards the enemy, and it has like negligible firepower. Like, this thing just is not made for combat. It's made for supporting a fleet, which is very good. It does get Void Engine Overclock, which is something that all the Murmansk-based ships can get. And it means that at the end of turn 1, you can not roll a dice to see if you will emerge from unexpected arrival, but you automatically arrive, which is great. But you get pointed damage, disorder token, and critical damage, like the reactor leak, which is fine. You can get rid of those because you launch 8 dice for repairs, so yeah, should be really fine. But it means it reduces a little bit your repair capacity, let's say. But what you do get if you do this is you get the capacity to arrive like just where you need it on the table at the end of turn 1, and you do get to be safe from enemy fire for the entire first round, which is usually the most lethal, which is very good. One thing that you do need to consider as well is that this Murmansk does barely have any weapons. So if you arrive from unexpected arrival, it means you shoot at crippled value for your weapons, but it doesn't matter as much for the Murmansk because, like, whatever, it doesn't have that many guns. Much more efficient in terms of firepower is the Tobolsk. So this ship has all the weapons. As you can see, it has all the weapons pointing at the front, but it loses any repair capacities. So it can repair itself, but not ships around it. Bit of a shame, but it really compensates by being like one of the most devastating ships in the entire Commonwealth arsenal or Black Wolf arsenal. It does get 5 SRS token. It has multiple generators to protect itself, like a shield generator. You can have a magnetic or shroud, and yeah, it's very efficient. You also have a cryo generator, which with the cryo capacitors, so it means you have sustained on your cryoblast. So this thing just kills anything it gets near. You can also replace all your weapons with railguns, small and large. So yeah, if you do that, it becomes even more expensive than the Anastasia, but it can really bring a lot of firepower to bear. This ship is the one that I like the most to deep strike, because it kind of wants to be close to the enemy, especially if you keep all the gun batteries and stuff. But it does not need to stay close to its fleet, because unlike the other two versions, it doesn't have repair capacities, so it can just be on its own and be very good. If you do use Unexpected Arrival and Void Engine Overclock, it means that at the end of turn 1, this thing will appear in the rear of the enemy, just obliterate something like with the ramming action, then with the boarding action, and keep shooting. Okay, I crippled the value, but it's already good. And then the next turn, so turn 2, you will activate it first, of course, and yeah, it will do a ton of damage, like, for sure. And then the enemy is taken between the Anvil and the Hammer, between your fleet and the Tobolsk. And yeah, that's a very good combo. If on top of that you also manage to bring Deathbringer next to it, I mean, come on, like that, this is just rude to your opponent, but it is very efficient. Though it is a lot of points, and while it is immensely tanky because it has a ablative armor and all these shield generators and stuff, and it has quite a lot of hull points, it does not have that good armor and citadel value. So focused fire from your opponent will do a lot of damage on a Tobolsk. So yeah, be careful about this. You can also build the ship as Anastasia. And I would recommend preparing to build it as Anastasia, or at least to magnetize. And if you have only one choice, yeah, I recommend the Anastasia. Why? Because as we said, it's one of the only 2 flagships available for the Black Wolf, so that's already like very important if you want to make legal lists. And it is very good. It's even more expensive than the Tobolsk, but it has less firepower. It loses some rocket batteries here, and it gets some repair facilities. So okay, fine. It is less good at repairing than the Murmansk. It has a little bit less firepower than the Tobolsk, but it does a bit of both. This is the ship that I maybe would not suggest to deep strike because it has railguns. You just replace these 2 rocket batteries with smaller railguns, and it has very efficient forward-facing firepower with railguns, and it still sends SRS token. And you can just deploy your fleet around it so it can repair them from turn 1. You don't want, especially with railguns, to have them crippled, and since they can shoot from so far away, yeah, just having it in your deployment zone, you should have easily enemies to shoot at during turn 1. So yeah, I would recommend having the Anastasia in the front of your fleet so it can soak up some damage and just start trading railguns with the enemy very early in the game. And yeah, that's how I would recommend playing it. Plus, it is such a gorgeous model. Like, just look at it. Okay, it is a donut, but it's just a floating citadel. It's like so cool. Now that we've seen the different flagships, let's have a look at the support cruisers. I will go very fast on the Pravda because you can only play this if you use a Commonwealth fleet, and we will talk more about it when we go back in time and talk about the Mojaiski Battlefleet. But what you need to know is that it's very resilient for a carrier. The Commonwealth token, which can by the way be sent also by the Tobolsk and Anastasia, are very good for taking out Mass 1 ships. Like, they're the best SRS token offensively for now, because they have piercing and rails, which means -5 citadel on the Mass 1 ships. You will kill them, no questions asked. And these SRS tokens are also very good for putting a lot of critical damages on Mass 2 or Mass 3 ships. So yeah, very good. One thing to note is that now you can build your Pravdas with railguns, which is very good. It means that you can just park them in the back of your line with railguns and just send your SRS token 40 inches away and still shoot with the railguns 40 inches away. So yeah, very good ships. And now let's talk about the Morozko a little bit more, because it's basically the same as the Ratanga without the drill. The Morozko is basically a better version of the Norilsk, which was the heaviest version of the frontline cruisers that you get for the Russians. It does lose focus gunnery, which was some bonus dices, and it does cost 10 points more. But what it gets for its trouble, it's this cryogenerator, which is this blast, devastating, hazardous attack, which is very good at closing range. And yeah, this is a blast attack that can just evaporate entire squadrons of Mass 1 ships, like no questions asked again. And it is very efficient. And we start to touch the point of like what the Black Wolf can help you as mercenaries. It's to deal with hordes of Mass 1 ships. They have a lot of good extreme range attacks, which is good, and they have a lot of blast templates, especially with all the cryo generators that you will have. So this is what they are very good at. Other than that, it's just a solid ship. It wants to be at closing range to use its cryo generators, so I would not recommend to keep or rocket batteries, just full gun batteries. I'm sorry, yeah, no rocket batteries, just put gun batteries everywhere, front, back, etc. Very good, very efficient gun platform. And if you actually want to play these ships as Black Wolves, you do need to bring them as a Hatanga. And what does this allow you to do? It's basically the same as a Morozko for 13 points more, but you get this assault drill. And yeah, again, as you've seen in the latest battle report, this thing just obliterates anything it touches. It is very efficient, plus the Hatanga is a little bit more defensive than the Morozko even, with a Citadel 13, and it has 10 hull points in total. So yeah, very tanky and very threatening at close range, and of course, because of that, you really want to replace the rear gun battery with a shield generator. That's the best option, or magnetic generator if you're facing a lot of SRS. The defensive generator of your choice, I would recommend shield. Why? Because these ships will attract a lot of firepower from your opponent. Even just from the psychological point of view, you will have several of those just charging at the enemy with their duels. The enemy will want to take care of those because they will be the number one threat that you will see, and which they will be. And they're already resilient with Citadel 13, with ablative armor, so if you put them shield generator on top, they can really be demoralizing to shoot at, because they will just not stop. And in some of the lists that we'll see, you can have literally 4 of those charging at the enemy, which means that they will be kind of like your first line of defense, and you want those to be as resilient as possible. And their main weapons are not their gun batteries, it is the drill, of course, and their cryoblast. And those are your main weapons, so you want to be as defensive as you can on the side. Now let's have a look at the newest ships from the Black Wolf Battlefleet that were released then, and you can now find those in the Aquila Battlefleet, which we'll talk about later. But yeah, what are those Ukrainian / Black Wolf submarines? First, you have the Mass 2, the Khizak, which are very, very efficient torpedo bows. Like, they do throw 12 dices at closing range, which is huge, and 7 dice per support, so you can just spam those. They do get even cheaper when you bring additional ships, because they are actually mine layers. So yeah, you do have additional, like, these very powerful mine laying abilities that does not multiply when you add ships, but it's fine because then you can have a very efficient package of 3 Khizak for quite cheap, and then you will just point at something and throw a real rain of torpedoes this way. It does have some weird weapon directions, the same as the Aquila. For example, it has a regular torpedo salvo pointing to the rear, which is not really where you want to shoot, especially since you cannot use unexpected arrival, so it's quite rare that when you will have enemies to your rear, because those ships you want quite far away from the enemy. And yeah, I would highly recommend to have as many of those on the table as you can. First of all, I just love this very like bulky submarine appearance, like I just absolutely love the model. And they are extremely efficient Mass 2 ships, period. I wouldn't be surprised if they get a little points nerf later in the future, I hope not. But yeah, they don't have ablative armor, thank god. But they are submarines, so they are submerged, and they will be a huge threat to your enemy. Like, they might influence the local meta where we play in Paris, because people will want to start to bring maritime patrol ships to counter those, because they are that good, especially if you attach some piranhas. And the piranhas are those quite small Mass 1 submarines. They look big on the picture because like I put it so you can see the details. But yeah, they are small. And yeah, they do have a single torpedo salvo to the front, and that's it. But that's 7 dice lead and 5 dice support. That's already very good. And that's for 35 points. So they are fragile, Mass 1s. But again, like for a torpedo salvo, I would pay this like every single day, no problem. They have only this weapon, but that's because that's all they do. Like, they don't do much more. They shoot torpedoes at extreme range, and yeah, that's it. And they can accompany your Aquila, not your Aquila, your Deathbringer, for example, or Anastasia if you do deep strike, and that's their only role. And they do it extremely well. Like, they are very efficient ships. Especially, like, you can play them in large squad of 4, which is absolutely reasonable, it's good. But something even better you can do is to actually attach those to Aquilas and Khizak, or of course your flagships, because it allows you to actually do one single attack of torpedoes that will be devastating. Because as you can see, they don't lose that much being support instead of lead. So yeah, you really want to throw a lot of dices at your enemy in one go with torpedoes to overwhelm the anti-torpedo defenses of your enemy, and those can do it very, very efficiently. Be careful though, there are more and more aerial units in the game, or scheming that can become aerial. Torpedoes cannot touch these kind of units. So if the enemy brings a lot of Zeppelins or a lot of French scheming ships, etc., they can really nullify your attacks by just not being targetable by the main weapons of your submarines. Finally, we have Stoletovs, which have more torpedoes actually even, but mostly they focus on rockets. These ships used to be way undercosted for what they did. They were mass 2 ships for 48 points, and they had just a ton of weapons. And you could combo them with special battle fleets. We'll not tell about what once was and is no more, but yeah, just know that they were very good. Now that these overpowered ships are more like on the same level as anyone else, they're still very efficient. They do have a lot of weapons, including the newest version of the Russian rockets, the Katyushas, which is just a lot for 48 points. However, it's much harder to give them a lot of bonuses and to link them all together, which is what made them devastating in the first place. And they still have a lot of firepower, but yeah, just know that it's not as oppressive as before. The second part of the nerf, which is the hardest one, is that these are now mass 1. And yeah, I know that my enemies tried before to cripple them. They still have the same number of hull points, 4, as they used to be. But yeah, many times they started the game with all being crippled because they received each one very strong attack, but it didn't kill them. And then they could just do what they wanted. However, now if they pass the citadel, if your enemy passes the citadel, it will not just bring like a critical damage, which is not that bad. It will actually kill them outright. If the enemy passes the citadel, your Stoletov is just gone. For 48 points, it is a lot. Like you will be sad when this happens, but it is normal, and it allows your enemy to have a little bit of counterplay, which is fine. It's good. How you will want to play the Stoletov, you will want to play them as far away from the enemy as you can. Like really, they have a huge range with their movement, because most of their weapons can be extreme range. And just give them a highway in front of them, so when they activate, they can move 10 or 16 inches forward, which is a lot. And then they unlock their little bonuses, allowing all their weapons to become extreme range. And from then on, you will just rain death. Consider them as one-shot units. They will activate once at the first turn, and then they will just mold under the enemy fire. But for this one activation that they will do, it will be a lot of firepower, and that's really cool. If you can activate them for turn 2, it means your enemy made a big mistake, or you played them really well, like hiding them after their movement or something, and then they will just do the same at the second turn. And they're so efficient that if you can get to use them for 2 turns in a row, they will pay back their points like 10 times. I exaggerate a bit, but yeah, they're really efficient. Finally, we arrive at a list proposition of a pure Black Wolf Mercenary fleet, using all the models that you get in the box. And yeah, this is a very efficient fleet for what it got. Okay, this is like literally more than about 2,200 points. So there is a lot in it. But you can just take some elements out, and depending on which point size you play at, and it gives you a good idea of what a full-sized Black Wolf fleet would play as. So here we have our 2 Black Wolf Battlefleets, which is the maximum we can get because we have only 2 flagships possible, the Anastasia and the Deathbringer. They each have their mandatory unit of Chizak. I put them 2 by 2 so they can link together without leaving one on the side, and it's quite efficient. Then you have on each side again 2 Piranhas that will be attached probably to the flagship themselves, so that if you want to be a little tricky and deep strike both the Anastasia and the Deathbringer, you can bring the Piranhas around, and that will be a big threat to your enemy. You also have a single Aquila Grand Submarine extra, and yeah, this is a very good ship, so keep it in the rear between your Chizaks, and it will do very well as well. Then you have, again on each side, 2 Hatanga Creo assault cruisers, yes, with the shield in the rear and the railguns to the front. Why I put railguns on the front? It's so that on the first turn they can already be quite efficient, and the railgun is also a weapon that does not degrade at point blank, which is where you actually want to be with the Hatanga. So it means that you don't have to focus about your placement and optimizing your firing angles and distance so much. You can just charge with your Hatangas at the enemy with your drills turning, and just scare the enemy with it, and don't worry that much. Just point and click at the enemy, charge them, and just drill them and kill them. The Hatangas will attract a lot of firepower on the turn 1. Expect to lose a few of those if your enemy is determined to sink them, but then it means that while he is focused on dealing with this threat, which is a big threat, yes, the rest of your fleet can do their thing and deep strike and do their stuff, and it's very good. And finally, you have the 4 Stolet of Ekranoplans, all in one unit only. It's better, I think, not to spread them out. It does mean that you can temporize a little bit better and maybe cover 2 flanks at the same time. Okay, that's good. But I really think that the big advantage of the Stoletov is to link as many weapons between each other as you can. And in larger units is better because you will basically use them one time and then they will die. And yeah, I really think it is more efficient for them to be played as one big unit that will just be a huge hammer that will fall down one time on the thing that you want to destroy, and they will destroy it efficiently. So that's how Black Wolf Mercenaries list might look and play as. We will talk more about the Ukrainian battle fleet that you can also build with these ships when we'll talk about the Akula Battlefleet Set. And yeah, you can really very happily collect the Black Wolf Mercenaries and add a little something to your existing fleet, whether you play, I don't know, Covenant or Sultanate or Empire, no, doesn't matter. You can add a little fleet of the Black Wolf as mercenaries, and they will be efficient. For example, if you play the French from the Alliance, it means that your ships are quite fragile for now until we have Italians and South Americans, etc. They are quite fragile. Why not bring a little battle fleet with, for example, the Anastasia or the Deathbringer, and then you bring 4 Hatanga cruisers with shields in front. This is going to be your front line, and they will hold the enemy fire good, while your French scheming ships can use their heavy firepower from the far away. Otherwise, you play Prussians, for example, and you want to charge and board the enemy, or Scandinavian even better. Then it means you don't really have ships in the rear to support you. Well, then you can bring the Deathbringer for sure, and some Khizaks and Piranhas, and these will be your extreme range torpedo launchers. So as you can see, no matter what you play, you can really add some mercenaries, and they will complement your ships and fleet well. And yeah, really, I highly recommend buying this box for any players, because first it's a whole fleet in a box, and then they are very good as mercenaries to add on complement of your usual fleet. So thanks for watching this video that is now coming to an end. It was a little bit long, but we had a lot to talk about. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, don't forget to give us a little thumbs up, a like, or subscribe. It really helps, and tell us in the comments if you liked, and I will see you each other in the next video. Until then, remember to keep spreading the love around you. Gros bisous.